Hello and welcome back to the Allan Kardec USA channel. My name is Ciso. Today I'm going to be discussing reincarnation and how there are many scriptures of the Christian Bible that in fact shows very clearly that humans pre-existed first as a spirit that was attached to a fetus before birth, and when the body dies, that spirit returns to the spirit world until it must return into another human body once again. Now, the Bible doesn't specifically use the word reincarnation, and there's a very good reason for that. That word wasn't even invented until the mid 1800s, several thousand years after the Bible was written. You won't find that exact word reincarnation in any literature, in any book, in any language, anywhere in the world before about the year 1850. Instead, in the Bible, you will see words like rebirth, will awake, will be raised, has risen, will arise, returns, has returned, regeneration, born again, live again, resurrection. Reincarnation is a huge subject, and it would take many hours to inform you of everything there is to know about reincarnation. So I'm going to split up the topic into 5 separate videos as follows. The first video is the one you're watching now. The Bible speaks of reincarnation, and Jesus spoke of reincarnation, which I will begin presenting in a few moments. Then in future videos, I will discuss why we must reincarnate, the process of purifying the spirit, which is your soul, the washing or cleansing of the spirit in your body, something that takes many lifetimes to accomplish before we reach purification or perfection and find ourselves in the kingdom of heaven without needing to reincarnate anymore, because each reincarnation is a learning lesson until we reach that final graduation, so to speak. In the third video, I will do scientific proof and evidence of reincarnation, where I will discuss the works of Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Brian Weiss, among others. Next, we will have why, how, and when reincarnation scriptures were removed from the Bible, taking us back to the Bible once again, and telling you about who in power about 2,000 years ago made changes to the Bible by removing as much as they could about reincarnation. But they were not able to get all of it out, as you will soon find out. And lastly, I will discuss countries and religions where the majority of the populations believe in reincarnation, and how Socrates and Plato also spoke of reincarnation, with much of the writings coming from Plato. These 5 topics may be split up into separate parts, part 1, part 2, depending on the length of each video. So watch for those videos coming out sometime in the near future. As I've mentioned before, I began studying Spiritism in the year 1985, so going about 36 years now. I remember that one afternoon, about 2 or 3 years after I had been studying a lot about reincarnation, I was sitting on my living room couch, flipping the channels on the television. I was just relaxing and looking for something to watch I stopped pushing the channel button on the remote control when I saw an evangelist preaching. It might have been a Sunday afternoon. As I was about to switch to the next channel, the evangelist said something that caused me to freeze. He said, "Today, I'm going to talk about reincarnation." Well, you can imagine my excitement. Here is an evangelist about to speak about a subject that I have been learning about the past couple years. However, the very next thing he said was, "There is no such thing as reincarnation. And you know how we know that? Because there is nothing about reincarnation in the Bible." Now, at that point, I leaned forward in my seat in the couch and I spoke to the TV. I remember saying, "Well, that's not true. I've read the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. And he mentions several passages in the Bible that clearly speaks of reincarnation." Well, not that word exactly, but clearly the Bible speaks of reincarnation. So I wondered what Bible this evangelist was talking about. I only know of one, even though there are many different versions of it. First of all, and I spoke a lot about this in the very first video I did here, you can take almost any scripture in the Bible and come up with many different interpretations of it. Here in Allan Kardec's The Gospel According to Spiritism, he wrote this in the introduction: "Few know it in depth, and even fewer understand it and know how to deduce its consequences, its significance. In many cases, the reason for this lies in the difficulty that reading the gospel presents, which for most is quite unintelligible." In chapter 1, Kardec mentions the following about Jesus: "Many things that he said have remained unintelligible or wrongly interpreted." That's why we have so many variations of Christian religions, because everybody has their own interpretation of the scriptures. Spiritism teaches you that to use your own logic and reasoning, to use your own common sense, to understand the science of nature, the laws of nature, and that it makes no sense for God to go against his own laws. Now, most churches and religions don't want you to use logic and reason. They want you to have a blind faith and blind belief in what they're telling you. And that anything in the Bible that appears as a miracle, something we know is scientifically impossible, but made possible. Miracles. That goes against the laws of nature. Things we know are not physically or materially possible. The churches and religions say it is simply that: a miracle created by God. Churches and religions say you must believe it. Snakes that speak, Moses stretching out his hands and parting the Red Sea, people turn to a pillar of salt, a river turns to blood, a whale swallowing Jonah and then vomiting him out 3 days later, Noah building a ship, an ark, where he gathered a pair of every living species on earth and placed them on the ship just before a great flood. Now, don't get me wrong, all these Bible stories are great for children. But once they mature and the reality of life sets in, they understand these stories basically go against the laws of nature, God's laws of nature. Let's talk about the use of the word resurrection in the Bible. We understand it as a dead person coming back to life. The definition of resurrection, if you look it up, is a dead person coming back to life. Well, the word reincarnation has that same exact definition. A dead person coming back to life. Now, there are various definitions of the word resurrection. For instance, when a person dies and that person's body, that same person's body, comes back to life, that is also resurrection. It happens in hospitals quite often these days. But the people that witnessed that, and possibly the doctors at the hospital, prefer to call that a near-death experience. Near death, even though the person appeared to be actually dead and was brought back. There are several instances of these types of resurrections in the Bible. The prophet Elijah prays, and through God, he raises a young boy from death. A woman known as the widow of the town of Nain had only one son. He was in a coffin when Jesus touched it and said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk. Jesus resurrecting Lazarus is also a very popular story from the Bible. These events may be believable if we think of them as near-death experiences, and a sudden, passionate plea or caring hand from someone revived the person. Or maybe the person was just extremely sick and people thought they were dead. After all, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, it clearly states, "And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment." I have spoken about the use of the word man in the Bible when we know it means all humans, men and women. Spiritism teaches the same. A human being dies just once, and then the spirit, your soul, detaches itself from the body and it is judged. And a decision is made as to where that spirit, your soul, goes next. If the spirit, which contains your personality, your emotions, your thoughts, your memories, has more to learn, you are placed in a new human body. You may be judged many times, depending on your progress. Notice how that scripture did not say it is a last judgment or a final judgment, or that you are judged only once. It doesn't say that. It says you die once, your human body, the body dies once, but you are not judged once. It doesn't say that you are judged once. The problem with some interpretations of the Bible is when it is defined as a person that has long died, when he or she has decomposed, that the body has rotted down to its skeletal remains, and eventually much of that body turning to dust. When that same body returns to life, or will return to life someday, it is called resurrection by various churches and religions. What you must do when you see or hear religions preaching this is to do something that those churches and religions don't want you to do. Use your common sense. Our logic and reasoning and our knowledge of the laws of nature tells us that a body that has rotted and turned to dust is not coming back. One would have to believe in various fantasies and miracles to believe that this could happen. But you cannot truly believe that God will go against God's own laws and produce such a miracle. To produce a Night of the Living Dead or the Walking Dead scenario. Spiritism teaches us that your soul will be released from the body after death and return to the spirit world, which could be a sort of heaven, depending on your level of progress. Your spirit will be overjoyed when it learns that it has become freed of the gross, heavy, material prison called a human body. And that spirit lives on forever. The spirit doesn't die, ever. Keeping all this in mind, we know from all the scriptures in the Bible that are not near-death experience resurrections, but it's talking about bodies long gone and buried. We have to use our reasoning and know that when the Bible talks about coming back to life, resurrection, that it must be speaking of reincarnation. Because we know that dead, rotted bodies aren't coming back to life. In the book of Daniel, in the Old Testament, also in the Hebrew Bible, we see the following. Now, please keep in mind that often the Bible preferred to use the word sleep instead of the word dead. In the book of Daniel, it says, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Also in the Old Testament, your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. Is this not speaking of reincarnation? Then what is it saying? Here's another. When his breath departs, the person dies. He returns to the earth. On that very day, his plans perish. His thoughts perish, as shown in other versions of the Bible. My goodness, if that isn't a clear message about reincarnation. After the person dies, he returns to earth, and he loses memory of his past lives. In the New Testament, in the book of Acts, it reads, and have hope toward God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust. And there's a lot more. For an hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and come out, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring him those who have fallen asleep, died. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, sent from heaven, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, killed him. And all tribes of the earth will wail, cry loudly, on account of him. Because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead? And there's a lot more in both the Old and New Testaments regarding the raising of the dead. Now, reading these passages and knowing that dead bodies who have become skeletons and have rotted into the dirt of the earth aren't going to suddenly grow skin and working organs back into the full human bodies they once were, with nice faces, are not going to come out of cemetery graveyards, then what are they talking about when they speak of the dead coming back to life? What they are simply telling you is that resurrection is reincarnation. Unless you can give me a better explanation of all this that doesn't involve fantasies and miracles and going against the laws of nature that we know and understand, things that we know are scientifically and materially impossible, then resurrection must mean reincarnation. Yet somehow, over the following few thousand years after Bible scriptures were written, some religions didn't like the idea of reincarnation and want to tell you that they were speaking of something totally different when resurrection was mentioned. That they were speaking about dead, rotted bodies coming back to life. Thank you for watching part 1 of this first topic regarding reincarnation in the Bible. Remember to subscribe to this channel so that you are alerted when the next video comes out. Have a blessed day.